Hey gang, Richard Cleveland here again. Welcome to part 4 of our painting of the Man of Steel. This is the Man of Steel 3D print from 3D Print Shop. Had to make sure I got that right. Sorry for the length of time it's taken me to get a part 4 done. As you guys know, I was down for the count for a little while. Broke my hand. It is better. I still can't quite straighten that pinky, but it is doing better. It is improving every day. So thank you for those of you that sent me well wishes. I appreciate that. It was my own stupidity. These things happen. So, but we are now back to painting. And what we're going to do today on the Man of Steel is we're going to start bringing that skin texture that we did in the first 3 parts. We kind of laid down our foundation of color, or our skin tone, our foundation for it, in the first 3 parts that we did. Now what we're going to do is we're going to start to add a little bit of color around the eyes, into the cheeks, the chin, the nose, the lips. And we're just going to start building up that color. This is all about, if you want to get that realistic look, now, you want to build up color slowly, and you want it to work to your advantage. Again, don't be afraid to, if you mess up, to go back and repaint. I mean, that's part of what we do, and that's part of our learning process. One of the things that I like to use quite often is this low odor clear matte spray from Krylon. This is a great product. I use it all the time. I use it between coats of paint. And as I'm laying down color today, I'm going to show you that. Some of the tools that we're going to be using today, we're going to be using the same brush all day today. In this case, I am using a number 2 brush with a fairly long bristle. If I was doing a much smaller 3D print, painting is much smaller 3D print, I'd probably use a smaller brush. But for today, because we've got, this is like a half scale bust, we're going to go ahead and use this. Now for paints today, we are going to be using our flesh tone, our custom made flesh tone, which if this is your first time seeing this episode, then please, I would encourage you to go back to episode 1 where I show you how to mix this. This is a great base. I like this base. It works really well on all of my things. I have it thin enough that if I need to, I can airbrush it, but this is not about airbrushing. We're going to use a little bit of Vallejo Salmon Rose, and that number is 70835. Salmon Rose, there we go. We're also going to use a little bit of flat red. This is Vallejo number 957. Flat red, and we are going to use a little bit of gray blue, Vallejo number 70943. I'm sure I got the matte red one wrong, but so this is 943. This is 957. So this is blue gray. So this is going to help us start, and of course we've got our little water mix, which has distilled water, a little bit of alcohol in it, and then we've got some flow aid and retarder in there. I use these 2 products right here quite often. This is acrylic flow enhancer, and this is retarder. I use both of them to help the paint flow and not to dry quite so fast. Now, I am kind of counteracting that with the alcohol that I put into here, but I don't, in the little bottles like this, I don't put a lot of alcohol. So this is mainly for when I'm hand painting. I will mix this 50-50 with alcohol if I am going to do airbrushing, so that the airbrushing dries a lot faster. So let's switch cameras and we'll get started. We'll start to mix some paint here. I will move that down so you guys can see what we are doing down here today. There we go. Let's cut over. There we are. So today what we're going to do is we're just going to start with some of these paints. First and foremost, I always want to put down a couple of drops of my base flesh. I'm also going to put down a couple of drops of the salmon rose, which we can see there. And that is my base, so I'm going to grab myself a stick here and I'm just going to mix that up. And there we are. Now, I quite like that. That's a nice color. It's matching our skin tone quite nicely. And I'll put just a couple little drops of water in there just to keep it. There we go. Keep it thin enough that it's not going to dry out, and then I can continually use it. And there we are. So that now is in there. And of course, I got a little splotch on the desk there, and we'll just clean that up so we don't get that interrupting our other stuff. We'll just give that a little wipe. And now we're going to use these again, which are the makeup sponges which we've used in the past. We're going to start with a little bit of this red. Just put a couple of drops in there. 1, 2. There we go. Now I've put ball bearings in all of these, so you can actually see the ball bearings in them. And what I'm doing now is I'm just kind of getting a little purpley color here going. And we're going to mix that up as well. We'll get that going. There we go. And we're going to really thin this out. This is where we're starting to we're going to add some of this to our flesh mix as well. Put a little water in there. There we go. Now that's quite purple. You guys can see that on the screen. It's quite purple. I think I'm probably going to add just a little bit more red to that. It almost feels like my red is clogging a little bit. And that's not unusual. I've had some of these for quite some time, so. There we go. There we go. All right. So let's mix this up. That's a little better. A little more red. It's got a little bit of purple in there, which is what we want. And now that's really thick, so I'm not going to use that directly on the skin. I'm going to really thin that down. So I'm going to dump a little bit of water in here to this one here. Look at that. There we go. We're going to dump a lot of water in there. We're just going to pull some of that paint. I like to wet my brush before I start using it. So today I've basically set up 2 pots of water. There's one that is behind the Man of Steel here. That's my clean water. And then I have my brush water over here. So I'm just going to take a little bit of that color so you guys can see. Get a little bit of that color. I'm going to just bring it up here and water that down significantly. And I'll test it on the back of my hand. That's quite dark still. So we'll just grab a little bit more of that water. And that's getting better. Grab a little bit more. There we go. Okay. That's way better. You can see it's just getting into the crevices of my skin. So we're going to start in around the eyes on Superman. And I'll tilt them up here so you guys can see. So we're going to start in around the eyes. We're just adding a little bit of color here. And if it looks like it's too much, go in and dab it off. Now, one of the things that you can do if you're in this situation and you just think that it's a little too much, just take in a Q-tip and just go in there with a Q-tip and just dab it off. Let's get some more of that color. And we'll get up around the top of the eye here. Around there. Get in around the nose. And these are just areas, you know, look at your own face when you're doing this. And you will notice that some of the areas that you're going to be working on have a little bit of color to them. So you can see now we're starting to get that color in around the eye. So we're going to just continue working on that. Bring some down in here a little bit. Around that nose. We're going to come back and add some of that color later as well. At a later time, we're going to come back and we're going to add some color in there. Again, you want to get on those cheeks. If you get it onto an area that you don't want it, we're just going to follow the contour of that cheek. We're going to be very random here as well. So you can see now we're starting to get some color in that cheek. And we're just going to be very, very random here. By doing this, we're now introducing, you know, some of that color that we need into our Man of Steel. Now, this is not the end all and be all of the color that we're going to use, because at the end of the day, we still want to be able to come back and put highlights in. So we're just going to continue going on, maybe down along this line here. We'll just take our finger and get in there and soften that up. Right around here, around the mouth. Get in on that chin. And the reason I'm doing this so thin is because by doing it this thin, I can slowly build up that color. If I don't like it, I can always go back over it, you see. So let's go back around the nose here, especially down in and underneath the nose. And just take my finger and just add some of that in there. I want to get in around these areas here. And now, because my brush is so wet, I'm able to get it into areas that I normally wouldn't get it into. And now you can see that I'm starting to build up that color. Let's go back to switching this to overhead. There we go. That's a better look for you guys. You guys can see that better as we're working on it. Maybe we'll stop this light down one. There we go. There we go. That's better. All right. So we can see what we're doing here. Let's do a little bit more work on that cheek, around the eye. Get in that temple a little bit. Around the ears. And this is where we're starting to lay down getting some of that blood vessel-y color into the skin. And again, we're going to come back and we're going to highlight some of this later on as well. Now my brush is getting kind of dry, so I'm going to just bring over some more paint here and bring up some more water. Because I don't want this to be really, really, really got a lot of pigment in it. I want it to have just very little pigment in it. We're going to go ahead and do this eye now. We're going to get in there and we're just going to line the eye around the eye here. Again, look at your own eyes and see where the color is. Get your Q-tip in there if you can't get your finger in there. And just add some color to those eyes. And you can see now we're starting to get some of that color deep down in the eyes where we want them. We know there's going to have a little bit of color up in here. Now, because this is a character of myth, our paint job on something like this is going to be our own interpretation. This is not going to be somebody else's interpretation. This is going to be your own interpretation. And as we build up that color, see if I'm still, yeah, there we go. As we build up color on our Man of Steel, we can decide for ourselves exactly what we want here. And now we want to get this area here done. Now I may have gotten a little too much, so I'm going to dab that off. And if you get it right away, if your cotton starts to get like this, go ahead and think about switching to our wedges that we picked up for the last episode. We were talking about those. And it'll do the same thing. It's going to blend that just the same as we did before. And you can see I'm very subtle here because I don't want to build it up so much that I don't like it and that there's too much pink. We're not trying to give Superman, you know, a makeup effect. We're not trying to put rouge on him. What we're trying to do here is we're basically just starting to lay down the foundation for the rest of our colors. And you can see now we're starting to get a little bit of that pink down in here. Along the jawline a little bit. We'll maybe go in and coat those lips really quickly. And this is just to add contrast. Now this particular model has really, really thin lips. So you can see how that's already made a big change in the lips. And I'm going to pat a little bit of it off. I more want that color to get down into the crevice of the lips, more so. And I like this brush because it's got a nice point on it. So we got a little bit of color in his lips now. Let's finish around his nose. And we want to get right around the nostrils there, because that's where we have the most redness. So we will go in and we will do that. Now it kind of looks like he's a little drunk at the moment because he's got a little bit of a pink nose, but that's okay. We're going to run some of that color down the bridge. We'll just blend that in. Again, on that chin, I'm just going to go very, very lightly with basically what's left on my brush. A little bit underneath that lip. And we'll start doing some of these areas, because they're going to be a little bit more pink. And then we are going to come back and maybe we'll gloss coat or get the eyes sort of set up today. Think about where the color is on your own face. That's a big part of it. Look at pictures of people. Study some photographs. That always helps a lot. If you want to see more of a movie look, then I would suggest that maybe you look at movies a little bit more often. Just try these techniques. I mean, they don't hurt. As we try them and we move forward, if there's something that we don't like, we can always, change things up by adding, more paint. You get a little bit in that temple area. And be random about it. I mean, you don't have to, it doesn't have to be perfect, because again, we're building up that paint, right? So like here, maybe I'll put a little bit of color and, maybe a little bit over here and just blend that in. Create some shadowing or shading there. Again, it's all very subtle as we move forward. You can see we're already starting to get that look that we're after in terms of the color of his face. So as we build up, we're just doing it very, very subtly, because it's important that we don't go too heavy here, because if we go too heavy, I'll put a little bit of that pink color down in there. If we go too heavy, then we end up having to come back and clean it all off. So because this model is so big, we don't have to do a lot here, but we are going to, just bring in some of this color. Along the neck, so we get a little bit more pinkish in that neck. And look at the highlights of the skin, because that's where you're going to find a lot of blood vessels closer to the top of the skin. Like you can see down in here, for instance. We're just going to work our way around now the neck and build up some of that color as we go through. Just highlighting, because maybe he's got a little bit of irritation on his neck. He is a little bit older after all. And you'll see that what I'm doing here with this color is I'm just kind of dragging it. I'm filling my brush with that paint, and I'm just kind of dragging it along these lines, these heavier lines. And then I'm bringing back my sponge and just softening it out. And there's not a lot of color on. I've got that sort of purpley red color very, very thin. So you're not going to see a lot of it. But that gives me the opportunity to build up just as much as I want. And if I think it's too little, I can come back and put a little bit more on it. And that's a big part of painting, is don't get caught up in putting too much paint in one area, because if you do that, you just have to go back and repaint it. And although that's not the worst thing in the world, some people might think it is. It's not the worst thing in the world. You can always go back and repaint it, because that's part of what we do. A little bit more down that bridge of the nose there. There we are. So there we have the basic of what, you know, we're kind of working towards. Now I'm going to clean this brush, and I'm going to grab some of my highlight color, which I mixed up a little bit earlier. And you guys can see that there in the palette. I got a little, I'm just painting everything around me at the moment. I'm going to grab some clean water and put it over here. And now I would probably come back and just do a quick little dry brush. And as a matter of fact, that's what we're going to do. We're just going to put this brush off to the side for now. We're going to grab ourselves a nice stiff wide brush and a little bit of kitchen roll. Grab some kitchen roll here. We're going to do a little bit of dry brushing over some of these areas just to bring out the highlights. And we're not going to do too much. We're just going to do a little bit. Get our paint loaded up here, and there we go. So now we're just going to highlight some of these areas. Down the nose a little bit. On the tops of the cheeks. You can see how that's already making a difference as we dry brush. And now I'm pulling in one direction here. Starting at the top, and I'm just kind of pulling down in one direction. And with a light hand, you can start to see some of that variation in there. You see how it's starting to pick up the highlights of some of the areas that we already worked on. And it's just, all we're doing is just pulling down. Now I guess I'm not the authority on painting, but I've done a lot of painting in my time. And these are just some of the techniques that I like to use. Got a little bit much in there? Get your finger in there. Looks like you got too much, get your finger in there. And just pull it down. And again, we're doing a little bit of blending as we're going along with these highlights. Now I could make this a little thinner, or actually a little brighter. And I might just go ahead and do that, just so I can pop those highlights out a little bit more. And all we're doing is just getting the tops of those apple cheeks that he's got there. And again, just the tip of the nose and the tops of those nostrils. And again, we're just going to take our finger so I'm pretty happy with the way that has come out so far. A little bit of a dark spot up in there. I'm going to see if I can get a little bit of color up in there. kind of match what we're doing here. And because that is so small, I will just take my the color is so close to the color that we have on there right now. So, and because I haven't spent a lot of time watering it down, like it's not thin at all. I could thin it out and certainly do a wash, but that's kind of not where I'm at with this right now. I am going to come back and do washes a little bit later on. We're going to do more spot washing. There's a lot more color that has to go into our Kal-El here. And with a very light touch, you can see that we're not even really changing a lot, but we are adding some color. And you'll see it, you may not be able to see it on camera here right now, but you will see this close up when you're doing it. So let's get some color in those eyes. We're gonna work on getting a little bit of color in those eyes. We're gonna use that same brush that we used earlier, which is the number 2. And I have a warm oyster gray that I've already mixed up. So I'm just going to grab a little bit of that, and we're just going to base coat the eyes. I'm just going to use the lid. And sometimes to get a point back on my brush, I will drag it on my kitchen towel. And all we're going to do here is just base coat these. You don't want to use a titanium white because that'll be way too bright. What I do is I mix a little bit of raw sienna, or pardon me, what do I mix into that? A little bit of a yellowish sort of color, some sunny yellow into it. Very, very little. Now I am trying to get back to painting with this hand again, so bear with me. And just take your time. Again, we're not trying to complete the eye in this stage. All we're trying to do is just get a little bit of color in there so that we can see where we're going with this particular model. So we're going to do some eyes over here as well. I'm just trying to sneak up on that line. You don't have to get super crazy with it. You just want to sneak up on that line. And if you sneak up on it, chances are you won't have to go back later and go over it. These eyes are quite thin. And we'll get a little bit more in that corner. Maybe a little bit much on my brush. A little bit more in this corner. So that's now giving us a little bit of contrast. I know he kind of looks zombie-like at the moment, but it's now giving us a little bit of contrast. So when this is all dry, I'm going to hit it with some of the clear coat, the matte sealer, and we're going to seal in the work that we've done. So when we come back a little bit later on in another episode, everything that we've done will be sealed. But before we do that, let's grab some black. We're going to just take it right out of the pot. It doesn't have to be super thin. And we're going to paint the hair, and we're just going to rough coat the hair. We're not going to do a super fantastic job on the hair. Wow, that paint looks like it it needs some water. So we are going to put some water in there. It looks like it needs to be thinned out quite a bit. One of the tricks that I do is I put these little stainless steel ball bearings in my paints, and they don't, because they're stainless steel, they don't rust, and because you don't want, you know, rusted metal in your paint, because it won't do any good for your paints. So then I'll put that lid back on, and I'll shake that up now. And you can hear it. You can hear that. And all this is just the black acrylic paint that I've thinned down so that I can paint with it. And I'm just going to give that a good shake up. With the 2 ball bearings in there, it really helps to move that paint around and get it mixed really well with the black. So we should have, yeah, that looks way better. So let's start base coating the hair. And I usually like to take out of the lid first. And all we're going to do here is we're just going to add contrast. That's all. We're going to work our way, because this hair is really, really textured. And if we can get down a good base layer of this hair. And the funny thing about Superman is that he's got that raven black hair. What I do is I kind of sneak up, again, just kind of sneak up on the edge of the hair, and then I'll pull it back. So I'm not getting it on the figure itself. And we don't have to be super precise here, but I'm trying to keep it off the work I've already done. This is just going to offer me some contrast. And again, I'm just pulling really quickly. As I get it, sneak up on that, I'm just pulling it really quickly back. All the while, I'm just trying to keep my brush. You can see how I'm keeping my brush here, and I'm trying to follow the hairline. And then later I'll come back and get in and do some of the other areas. I'll come in with a finer brush and just kind of clean up the edge. Well, you guys can't see that. This curl. I'm not going to go right down into his curl here. Now I'm using the thin edge of the brush to kind of get in there. And remember, this is just a base coat. This doesn't have to be perfectly covering everything on your undercoat. This is just the base coat. We got a little bit up here that we can take care of. Now, I'm almost out of paint on my lid, so all I'm going to do is, let's get some of the garbage off of there. That's the problem, is you tend to build up garbage around your paint after a while. So I'm just going to close that up, give it another shake, deposit some paint on the lid again. And I really love these Tamiya bottles for that. And the less paint that I have in that lid, the less I'm going to overfill my brush. You see, I'm still fairly far away from the ferrule on the brush. And we're going to, again, just follow that, sneak up on it, push into it, and then pull back. I love this model, even though it's like super, super textured in the hair. I really love this model because it really captures that comic book Superman. And for us, what we want to do is we want to give this Superman a little bit of realism. Now, there you go, Cleveland. Go ahead, touch his hair. Touch the wet parts of his hair. So we're going to continue base coating this hair, and then we'll come back in a little bit and we'll get into all of the areas closer to the skull. Now I certainly could use a different brush here to do the rest of the hair, and I think that's what I'm going to do. Is I'm just going to move to a different brush. Put that one in my water for now. Let's go to something that's got a little bit more width to it. This one looks good, and now we'll just go ahead and dip that down into there. And yeah, look at that. We can get right in there. And all this is doing, again, is it's just giving us a little bit of contrast to kind of see where we are with our paint job so far. You'll notice I'm not wiping my brush as I'm bringing it out of the pot because this is such a big area to paint. I just want to get that paint out of the pot and onto the model. It's just so that we have, again, that contrast for when we're going in and getting some of the other areas. When we're laying down more of that skin color. Get around the back of his head here. And you see I'm just pulling up that paint up to the top, up to the crown of his head, and then I'm just coming down to meet it. This is not going to allow your paint to blob, so you won't have thicker areas. This gives you kind of a nice uniform coat of paint. And it makes it much easier. There's a lot of undercuts in this hair, so I'm going to have to, go back and just fill in all of those undercuts that I missed. But I'm not worried about doing 100% coverage here. I'm just trying to get a contrast of the color of the black that we're using. Now I'm going to switch to a smaller brush here, just so that I can get into some of those smaller areas. And I'm just going to use this little guy here. This is this is a 1/8 inch brush. This is a flat brush. And I'm just going to get into, put my finger on there so I can rest it. I'm trying to get close to the skin, but I'm not trying to get the skin, if that makes sense. Just trying to get close. There's some areas right in here that definitely help out if I can get in there. And that, kids, is where we're going to end off for today. We've let's kind of review what we did. We used the blue-gray mixed with some of the flat red, or the gray-blue, pardon me, and we mixed that with the flat red. And that allowed us to get in some of those blood vessel-y colors. Then we went back with a mixture of our salmon rose and our custom base. We used very thin washes. Then we just basically took our warm oyster gray, which is mainly white, but it's not super white. You'll see later on as we work on the eyes more, those eyes are going to look a little bit more realistic when we're done. We coated the lips. We did just a little touch of dry brushing here and there. We're going to let this dry. Then we're going to hit it with our Krylon Clear Matte Spray. And we'll sit that aside for 24 hours, and then we will come back and start painting him yet again. And until next time. So we covered a lot. Again, there's still a lot more color to go into this. This is only part 4. I'm thinking we're probably going to be, I don't know, another 7-8 hours just doing the skin and the hair. When we've done that part, then we'll go to start working on the clothing. But we want to get that skin and hair done exactly the way that we want it. And then we can move forward. Now, all the techniques that you're going to learn here are techniques that I've practiced. They're techniques I've gotten from other people over time, and I've just kind of adapted them to myself. That's a big part of learning painting, is watch other painters. Find other painters on YouTube. Raphael Rabelais Jr. on YouTube is a very good guy to watch. He does a lot of airbrushing. He's going to be he uses a ink technique that I'm going to be using. So we both kind of use the same thing. Actually, I learned it from him, how to get a lot more modeling into the face and go forward with it. So we're going to do that. We're going to do adding a lot more color. We're going to do a lot more dry brushing, a lot more highlighting, a lot more in the spot washing department. As we move on. So until next time, thank you, my friends, for joining me here again today. And again, these are going to start coming out regularly on Mondays on Patreon. So please leave a comment down below. If you've got any questions regarding the painting, you can always find me at The First Layer on Facebook. It is a group there. So just go facebook.com/groups/The First Layer. Or if you'd like to, you can go ahead and check out my channel over on YouTube, and that is The First Layer on YouTube, or just stick with me here on Patreon. And I really appreciate your support. Your support goes to helping me with the supplies that I need, so I don't have to take them out of my regular income, which right now is pretty slim, with my wife still not working. But until that happens, we're going to keep going the way we're going, and your support helps to, keep me painting and keep bringing you painting tutorials. So until next Monday, my friends, have yourself a great week, and I will talk to you when we start doing more on Superman next week.